Hello everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist, and I'll be hosting today's show on this 15th day of March, halfway through the month already. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, wind advisory comes back into the eastern Alaska range later tonight, tomorrow into tomorrow evening, as winds will kick up with the gradient tightening again, a couple of systems coming northward here to the west. So look for anywhere from 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts through the passes of the mountains. Otherwise, no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere else in the state as of this afternoon, Friday afternoon. And for the satellite imagery, some pretty good clearing here over the southeast Bering. It'll start closing in with clouds as the day progressed here, but still some clearing out that way as well as up in the interior. But the system coming northward, spreading high clouds northward into the, looks like just about into the Fairbanks area at mid-afternoon, but still some areas of sunshine back to the north and west of there as this big system, low center way down to the south, still well southeast of Kodiak Island, and the front right through here, already kicking winds up as high as 60 miles an hour in the Barren Islands, 55 mile an hour wind gusts Augustine Island today. And lighter winds and rainfall occurring over the southeast coast, but that'll be increasing as this whole system lifts northward later tonight. Up along the Arctic coast, not too bad, just some clouds and generally dry conditions up there, and really just light snow shower activity, especially along this band of cloudiness right through the, well, from the Kobuk Valley there southward, but again, nothing more than an inch or so. Some areas could have seen a little bit more, but that's pretty isolated. Otherwise, on today's graphic map here, or the surface analysis on today's chart, well, here's the area of some nice clearing going on from the, actually the northern Kuskokwim Valley up to the north there, but that's getting overrun with the cirrus shield of this next storm coming up. And rainfall amounts starting to increase now, nothing too terribly heavy, just 1/100 of an inch at Seward here during the day this afternoon. Yakutat picked up about 1/3 of an inch. And Montague Island, though, picked up 0.8 of an inch in the last 12 hours and about 1/2 an inch there at Kodiak Island. Otherwise, amounts not too bad, anywhere around 1/4 inch here for the southeast coast. Ketchikan had 0.4 of an inch of precipitation. And really not much going on. You can see clouds scattered around and snow showers scattered around, mostly along a trough here, very weak trough leading in some colder air back here to the west and northwest, bringing snow showers to the Pribilofs, light snow showers, and also up through the St. Lawrence Island area, some light snow at times through the Bering Strait, and on up mainly back to the north and northwest, and a little bit of snow shower activity in the western Arctic coast, but nothing really significant wind-wise at all here. Not a bad day over the Aleutians, light winds and some areas of clearing or sunshine, depending on where you are out there. There was a little bit of rain and snow at Adak, and then that's mostly snow showers scattered around the Shimia area. Forecast for tonight, we'll see that low pressure area tracks northward, but the main front still off the coast, nudging up toward the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. So definitely rain, gale force winds on the increase here tonight. Again, becoming moderate to heavy at times in the usual areas of the North Gulf Coast, back into western Prince William Sound and the Seward Peninsula areas. And rain and wind also increasing over the Panhandle. Up to the north, not much going on. Maybe a little bit of an increase in the winds in the Copper River Basin. The winds starting to trend up there for the eastern Alaska range, but north of the mountains should be dry and variably cloudy from the Tanana Valley all the way up actually to the north slope in the Arctic coast. Start to pick up some isolated snow showers along this trough axis. They become a little more widespread down to the south here into the Kuskokwim Valley, maybe into the northeastern Bristol Bay area with the colder air that could be in the form of snow. Then another break right along the coastline here with some clearing. They'll extend all the way up to the northwest coast, other than some possible flurries here on the western Arctic coast, maybe it'll be dry for the remainder of the area up there. And isolated showers over the Aleutians. Most of this activity staying up over the Bering Sea. But catching the Pribilofs, look for some snow showers tonight. And moving along to tomorrow, first day of the weekend. A couple of low centers now. One develops up here over the lower Yukon River Valley area, and another one develops and comes northward here to southwest Chillicothe Strait area. So that's going to keep it wet the entire day here for Kodiak Island. Rain and fog all day there. Winds not too strong. Stronger though, looks like gale force winds continue for the North Gulf Coast with that south to north flow pulling a lot of moisture up. So rain moderate to heavy at times continues, but that'll lighten up here. This trough moving into the southeast coast. In fact, that'll be moving through in the afternoon, so the rainfall will become more showery and tend to taper off here along the central and south coastal areas, but continue throughout the day up to the north. And again, Copper River Basin, a little breezy, could see south winds 25, maybe 35 miles an hour around Golcana and those areas, and maybe along the Alaska Range as well. Again, gusty winds there, and that'll result in partly to, well, at least say partly sunny and dry conditions for the mid-Tanana Valley there and upper Tanana Valley, with temperatures some locations rising in the lower 40s. And isolated snow showers, southern slopes of the eastern Brooks Range. Not a lot of action with that warm front. A little bit more here back to the west, but still not a whole lot. Rain and snow showers south of that feature to the east of the trough axis, back to the west in the colder air. Whatever falls will be in the form of snow here over the Yukon Delta, Norton Sound, up across Seward Peninsula in toward Kotzebue Sound and the northwest, but then you get in some clearing for Kivalina, Point Hope, and Cape Lisburne, and possibly the eastern Arctic coast. Still a risk of a snow shower on the west side there around Point Lay, but not much of one. And colder air coming southward here, pretty good snow showers there for the Pribilofs, and just isolated conditions here for the eastern Aleutians, maybe a little bit more snow shower activity out west. And then the outlook for Sunday. Got low pressure up here over the northwest, the trough extending southward there, producing areas of light snow from St. Lawrence Island and the Yukon Delta coast right across the Seward Peninsula into the northwest. And then a cold front right through here, producing possible areas of really light snow along that feature, drier and chillier back behind, and a little milder, definitely milder here on the east side there. Again, temperatures rising into the 40s in the Tanana Valley. And then another system here brings more rain, Kodiak Island, and moderate to heavy rain again here for Sunday afternoon or throughout the day Sunday along the North Gulf Coast, and wet across the Panhandle and windy in some areas. Probably the heaviest rainfall will be in the north, lighter to the south, but everyone's going to get some rain all the way down to Dixon Entrance. And back here to the southwest, drying out a little bit on the northerly wind, especially south of the Alaska Peninsula. Probably Bristol Bay, precipitation free, may see some sun breaks, and lots of snow showers out here scattered around the northern and eastern Bering Sea, especially along this trough. But again, that's staying mostly north of the eastern Aleutians. Pribilofs best chance of anyone out here seeing some snow showers. Well, Pribilofs and then the far western Aleutians shimmy in at too. Otherwise, could see a partly sunny day there for Atakanatka with winds, according to this gradient, look to be quite on the light side. And as far as low temperatures for tonight, a little below zero there for the Arctic coast into the North Slope with 0 degree isotherm running right along the Brooks Range. South of the mountains, teens, maybe single numbers, 20s, lower to mid into the Tanana Valley and central interior. And then back down into the teens over the Yukon Delta, near 10 for St. Lawrence Island, the colder air there, and single numbers up from Shishmaref on up to Point Hope. Lower 20s for the Pribilofs, upper 20s, lower 30s for the Aleutians, and upper 20s to mid 30s for Bristol Bay, with the warmest temperatures up to the northeast here. Looks like lows in the mid to upper 30s, south central Alaska into Prince William Sound, and lows mid 30s to mid 40s for the southeast coast. Highs tomorrow, mid to upper 40s here, most areas, some areas staying in the lower 40s there for the Panhandle. 40 to 45 here from the North Gulf Coast, south central Alaska, actually right into the Tanana Valley and the greater Fairbanks area. Lower to mid 20s in the Brooks Range, and single numbers for much of the Arctic coast. A little chillier here, St. Lawrence Island 18, but up to freezing at St. Paul. And your lows for Sunday morning, boy, quite mild there. This is probably the high temperatures. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, okay, Sunday afternoon, 40 to 45, and lower 40s here for south central Alaska. Single numbers there on the Arctic coast, and lower 30s here for the southwest coast, mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. Again, lower 40s for Kodiak Island, and in the 30s out over the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic here showing a lot of IFR caught up and carried northward here in southerly flow right up to the Kodiak Island area, North Gulf Coast, and across the northern Panhandle and down along the coastline, even up in to the southern Copper River Basin, up to the Talkeetna Mountains. And marginal VFR north across the Alaska Range with some IFR. Another band of IFR out here to the west, kind of weakening up here to the northwest with marginal conditions for the Bering Sea and Aleutians. And for Saturday afternoon, IFR here from Selawik Valley, or Selawik and Kotzebue, Shishmaref, right on down into northeast Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, and a little more extensive now over the southeast coast. And mostly VFR north of the Alaska Range, 40-mile country, Upper Tanana Valley, and then marginal toward the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And it looks like some VFR here from the Pribilofs down toward, roughly Cold Bay or so, otherwise marginal out west. And for the morning on Sunday, this band moves inland, a little more widespread up here in the northwest. It comes down across the Kuskokwim Valley and right into Kamishak Bay, Southern Cook Inlet, and exiting Kodiak Island, IFR North Gulf Coast, and IFR scattered mostly up here toward the southern slopes of the Brooks Range or the eastern interior, otherwise areas of VFR and marginal VFR, marginal for the Panhandle. And then for the afternoon Sunday, that band continues eastward here and narrows. They're pretty narrow now from the Brooks Range right on down into southern Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island. Again, the North Gulf Coast, south to north flow or south-southeast flow here, keeping it socked in with IFR there on in to IFR across all of the Panhandle. A little bit of a break here coming into Bristol Bay. Otherwise, mostly marginal out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Except in the afternoon, looks like it'll be VFR for St. Paul and St. George. And for passes, Anatuvik, occasionally marginal tomorrow. And Adigan, I'll go VFR there and hope for the best. For Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR with same pattern here, IFR, lowest conditions on the eastern approaches, better to the west. Same trend here for rain. Maybe a little better, just marginal VFR on the eastern entrance into the pass, and then out the other side, VFR, west side. And windy VFR, again, occasional threats of marginal VFR southern entrance. Isabel looks marginal. Mentasta, go for VFR tomorrow. And Tanita, IFR here on the eastern entrance, otherwise looks like kind of a marginal VFR day coming up. And Portage, definitely IFR there. And Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, 2,000-foot pocket now up over the eastern interior, carried north by those warm southerly winds. And otherwise 2 to 4 to 6,000 feet now, making it just to the southern tip of Prince of Wales Island. At the surface here, south side of the Alaska Peninsula tomorrow morning, and a little north of the Fox Islands there, but south of St. George Island. Icing-wise, above about 3,000 feet here, areas of possible icing of the light mixed variety from the Kuskokwim Delta area, maybe down toward Bristol Bay, back up to the northwest coast. And better chance of seeing some considerable moderate rime icing here along the North Gulf Coast into the Kenai Peninsula, and then that tapering off and kind of shifting through the Panhandle throughout the day. And for the jet stream here, good south to north flow, 120 knots, falling back to about 70 knots. This is the next system coming up, dissipating like the one yesterday did as it makes landfall along the coast here, and kind of a rebuilding of the West Coast Ridge going on here, centering over the Pacific Northwest and then building up across British Columbia, keeping basically southerly flow in place here for the next several days over mainland Alaska. And at 9,000 feet, southeast flow, 35 to 50 knots, and 40 knots in the central interior, then falling back to the northwesterlies across the Bering, 25 to 45 knots. 35 to 40 knot winds here along the coast of the Panhandle, 50 knots along the North Gulf Coast. And at 3,000 feet, 35 to 40 here coming up to the North Gulf Coast, and 25 into the interior, lighter up to the north till you get at the Arctic coast there, central coast about 30 knots. And northwesterlies 15 to 35 here coming across the southeast Bering and the Alaska Peninsula. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop along in the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, south central Alaska. Looks pretty good for some moderate chop, as well as the eastern Alaska range areas and the Panhandle, light to isolated moderate chop there. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Another area where the Federal Aviation Administration is using technology in advancing aviation safety is in the use of remote weather cameras as a tool to aid pilots in making safe flight decisions. Hello, I'm Sheila Balistreri.
So in '99, we really started what we currently call the Alaska Weather Camera Program. We say Alaska because it's the only place in the FAA that has this. One, it's available through the internet so that the pilots, their family, their friends, they can all take a look at what the weather's like before you go there. In addition, we have all of that available within all of our flight service stations so that each flight service station technician can call up and look at weather real time. And with that, provide a better briefing, whether it's pre-flight or in-flight, for the pilots. By far the most popular thing we've ever done.
The weather camera system has been a good one. I'm sure you can tell from the, if you had access to the number of hits that they get that, on each site, that they're well used, and they save a lot of gasoline, they save a lot of time for passengers out turning around in weather and coming back when a pilot can just look at the camera and make a decision based on that rather than going out and actually looking at the weather.
When we look at the cameras, and if it's a definite no-go situation, then we're not able, we don't send an airplane out to take a look at it and then have to just spend the gas and the time and energy to go out, take a look at it, and just turn around and come back.
By placing weather cameras throughout the state, we've certainly come a long way. Today, we have 55 cameras throughout the state, an investment of $7 million. 12 new sites are scheduled to be up and running by this October. This concept, I think, is stunning in its simplicity. The pilot goes online and can view 2 images for each location. The first shows what the site would look like in a perfectly clear day situation. The second shows current weather conditions. Pilots can now learn what the visibility is in the mountain pass they face and whether they want to fly through it before they take off. In many instances, they may decide not to fly, to hold on that flight for a while, depending upon what they see. And that's long before they set foot in the aircraft.
Alaska is a huge state, and the area covered so far by weather cams is comparatively small. In order for the project to be completed, 165 already identified sites need to be added. In what may be considered counterintuitive, many of these weather cameras are not placed at airports, but are positioned in or near mountain passes and other geographical areas, which are often used by pilots as navigational aids. Others are located at rural airports, where there are no weather observers or co-located with automated weather systems. Pilots report that the value in these weather cameras is the real-time information they receive about destination and route conditions. Flight service specialists also have access to the weather camera images and routinely brief pilots with the most up-to-date information before takeoff and during their flight.
We use the weather cams in 2 basic ways here at the flight service station. For self-briefing, to get ready to be able to brief the pilots, look at the weather cam where we have an airport with a weather report. We can compare what we see on the screen with what the weather report says. Where we do not have weather reports available, then we can look at the camera and again get a picture of what the weather is like at those locations.
When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is pull up the weather cameras at all the destinations in the southeast and check that against the actual reports at that station, and it gives you a lot better picture of what the weather's doing than what we used to enjoy with just the observation. I'm sure all the pilots are doing the same thing. I know all of our pilots do. A well-placed camera looking in 3 different directions, there's nothing like that. Be able to see in real time what your weather actually looks like before you take off.
Cost benefit is quite a bit as far as saving us money. As we don't launch a flight when we know that the weather's bad, when we can see it on the cameras that the weather is bad at our destination.
When the weather cam system was first proposed, there were some people who doubted its utility, and as they've come online, we've seen how the pilots really like to be able to see those pictures. They value it, and as they become available to us as briefers, we value it too.
I do thank you also for the cameras. I personally have used the cameras. I think that probably the one that's most used is the one over going through the pass into Lake Clark, and from time to time I get calls that it may not be functioning properly, which I'm pleased to say that Mr. Poe responds to very quickly.
During a recent independent study of Alaska pilots who have used the system, 68% reported making decisions to cancel or delay flights based on weather camera information. Pilots also reported that these decisions help them avoid additional fuel costs from flights that must be diverted or repeated due to bad weather. Now, these safety and economic advantages generated more than 2.3 million hits this past year on the FAA's Alaska WeatherCam website.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis today continuing to show growth out here on St. Lawrence Island, at least to a certain extent, and a little bit to the south. And this area right through here will probably continue to ice over and maybe down the Yukon Delta coast a little bit over the next several days. Winds will be pretty light, but the cold air will stay in place out there. Don't look for much of a southward progression in this area due to the the water temperatures being above freezing. And coastal water forecast here, southeast coast, south coast, southerlies 30 knots, seas up to 17 feet. Gales on the north coast tomorrow for seas approaching 20 feet and those southeast winds at 35. Southeast 30, gust 45 for northern Lynn Canal and 25 gust 40 for Stevens Passage. And small craft advisory is also out for Clarence Strait. And then on Sunday, 40-knot winds out of the southeast all along the outer coast for the panhandle of the next system, and seas just under 20 feet. Small craft advisories for the inside waters, southeast 30 for the southern and central areas, and Lynn Canal south 25. Prince William Sound, gales tomorrow, east 35, seas up to 9 feet, and south to southeast 30 knots with 18 to 21 foot seas for the North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands, another gale force wind day tomorrow there with southeast at 35, northeast 35 for Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories for Cook Inlet, northeast 25 to 30. And those continue into Sunday. Small craft advisories here for Cook Inlet, north-northeast at 25. Northwest now for Kamishak Bay at 25 knots. And southeast 20 coming down there for the Barren Islands. East 30 knots for the western North Gulf Coast. And then good gales coming into the east side there, Middleton Island. And on up into Prince William Sound, still east 35 with seas at 9 feet. And for Kodiak Island on the east side here, southerlies 30 knots, 16-foot seas, lighter winds in Chillicothe Strait. Swinging around to the north from Sitkinak to Castle Cape at 30 knots. Castle Cape to Cape Sarachef, gales northwest 35 and northwest 30 here for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Northwest 30 there for Bristol Bay. And for the outlook on Sunday, much lighter winds up here, 15 knots for Bristol Bay out of the northwest. Northwest 20 for the Alaska Peninsula, southwest of Sitkinak. That's where the strongest winds will be on Sunday at 30 knots from the northwest. Otherwise, northeast at 20, east side of Kodiak, Shelikof Strait, small craft advisories, north at 25. Fox Islands northwest, 25 to 30 knots tomorrow. Seas running 7 to 10 feet and 25 knot winds for Adak and Atka with 8 to 10 foot seas. And those 25 knot northwesterlies extend out to roughly Kiska, then they drop down to about 20 knots out west. And then on Sunday, they'll swing around to the east at 20 knots and turn southerly here around Chitka Island to almost Adak. But pretty light winds here for the central Aleutians in store for Sunday with just west-northwest at 15. And the Fox Islands, not too bad. Westerlies 15 to 20 knots, strongest winds on Alaska Island. Southwest coast tomorrow, northwesterlies 20 knots north of Nunivak Island, 30 knots south of the island. Pribilofs northwest 20, same forecast for St. Matthew Island. And light winds now for St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots out of the north. And then those will pick up to about 20 knots on Sunday from the northwest. West-northwest 15 here for the southwest coast. And northwesterlies 15 to 20 knots from St. Matthew Island down across the Pribilofs. And for the Arctic coast up here, central and east side, winds due easterly at 30 knots across the entire area. So brisk wind advisories extend all the way down to Cape Beaufort. Then you drop down to 30 knots there from the north-northeast all the way to Wales, about 20 knots. And then for Sunday, 15 to 20 knot winds here northwest for the Chukchi Sea. Northeast there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, turning east only at 15 there on the west side, about 20 knots there for the central coast, and then variable at 15 for the eastern coast to Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, this front still off the coast here, low pressure tracking toward Kodiak Island. Actually, another trough starting to develop here over the southwest interior. So periods of snow along that feature, just isolated snow showers to the north. Rain heavy at times, gale force winds here coming in with this front, increasing along the southeast coast as well. And for tomorrow, there's that low center develops over the lower Yukon Valley. And another one here keeps it wet over Kodiak. Another trough, southerly flow, rain heavy at times, North Gulf Coast, lighter over the Panhandle. And your outlook for Sunday, another system comes up with more wind and rain.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.